So the next pattern I'm going to look at looks very similar to the fan and spiders bookmark that we did last time. However, there's a different pattern marking in the centre. This pattern marking is called Roseground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain Roseground after we've seen it and after I've got the pairs set up at the top. So let me show you what the finished bookmark looks like. So I've got two versions of this bookmark. They're both worked identically. So in the centre, we've got this filling that looks like quite a square filling. There's very definite squares that you can see, and that's our Roseground. There are lots of different versions of Roseground. They won't all look square. They are all based around a diamond of 4 pins with a connection between them. But I'll talk to you more about the structure of Roseground and the pattern markings that you get for Roseground once we've got the pillow set up. So only difference between these two, they are worked exactly the same, is that I decided to put a variegated thread in this bookmark. I'm fascinated by the way that pairs travel through lace, and what the variegated is, it partly allows me to see some of that. So I can see this white pair that starts here, or it's a white pair, because that's what the way the colour's working at the moment. Travels through. Not quite sure what it does after that because there's a white one there. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. And obviously the white stands up against the blues and the reds. You can see a red doing something very, very similar. And obviously there will be threads going the other way if you looked at it much more closely. So there is one other difference on this bookmark, and that's around this edge. So on the last pattern, what we did is we worked a twist before we worked through the outer passive. If you were to look very carefully, what you'd see is that actually that looks a bit like one thread almost there. And that's because it is a pair, but we've worked through it in cloth stitch and twist rather than in cloth stitch. So it does pull the pairs together and makes it feel together. In both cases, I've used a single colour on this. So in this case, it was a white, and in this case, it was a red. So it does give a nice firm edge to the lace, and that twist does make a difference there. It's also a bit easier to remember to do it. So this is the working diagram for this piece of lace. So if you remember our last piece, which was fan and spider, we started off with 2 diagonal rows, 1 on each side, of half stitch, pin, half stitch. This is exactly the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set that up on my pillow. I'm going to talk you through that once again. That'll be the last time I'll talk you through that. I'll just refer you then to other videos. Then I'll come back to work out what on earth is going on in this Roseground and to break down the working diagram. I'll then come back and I will look at the fan, which is relatively simple, but just look at the differences in the fan. So I'm going to change the videos going forward. You've seen my hands working on the pillow a number of times now in terms of how to manoeuvre the bobbins. Now it's more important to see actually what is the detail of the lace. So I'm going to start off at the top, and as before, I've got my working diagram at the side of me. And when you're working this, you wouldn't normally have your working diagram on the pillow. You might have it at the side of you. But here you can obviously see both on screen at the same time. So, as before, I'm starting off with 2 temporary pins just above the work. And that is going to have my fan workers on them. So let me hang those in. Remember, these are temporary pins. They are just going to be there while I start them off. So half stitch, cross twist, pin, half stitch, cross twist, and release. being careful that neither of the pairs lifts above the work. So now I'm going to add the 4 passives on the left hand side and then the 4 passives on the right hand side. So over the pin, half stitch, pin, half stitch and release and repeat. So half stitch, pin, half stitch and release. And you can see I'm still doing exactly what I was doing in previous patterns. I am being careful not to lift the bobbins too much. I'm sliding up the I'm sliding up the pricking and so on when I'm putting in pins. So half stitch, which is, remember, green, pin, half stitch and release, and one final one on this side. Half stitch, pin, half stitch and release. Okay, so I'm now going to repeat exactly the same down that second diagonal to add the next 4 pairs in. So next one on a temporary pin, half stitch, pin, half stitch and release, being careful not to come over the top of the pin as I release. And again, half stitch, pin, half stitch and release. It's a bit shorter than the others. And then 2 more. So half stitch, pin, half stitch and release, and the final one, half stitch, pin, half stitch and release. Okay, so that's our pairs set up. So I'm now going to break the video. I'm going to get all my bobbins a similar length, and then I'm going to talk you through Roseground on an enlarged copy of the pricking, on the working diagram, and then I'm going to work the diamonds of Roseground. So I've just got the pricking with the first 2 repeats showing, or rather the first 2 sections of Roseground. So Roseground is always in a diamond of 4 pins. Sometimes you do get it with less pins, but it's always effectively a diamond shape. The pattern marking, there are a variety of pattern markings. There will always be a pattern marking for Roseground. So here it's a diamond. Obviously drawn on the computer, it's a filled in diagram. If somebody had drawn it by hand, it might be just a diamond. The standard one on the computer is actually to draw a line between the dots as well. I don't actually like that, so I personally never draw mine like that. Occasionally you also get pluses around all the joins between the Rosegrounds, the ins and outs of the Roseground as well. That isn't automatically set up on the computer program. Personally, I don't draw them like that, because some of the versions of Roseground, it doesn't feel like a cross. It does in this one, but it doesn't in all of them. So let me swap this to an enlarged copy of the lace. So here is a blown up version of the lace. This is where these holes are where our diamond sits in each of those 4 cases. there is a hole and there are pinholes, so a pinhole of 4 diamonds. And I talked about a connector between the two successive sections of 4, and that's this. And in this case, it is a cross. You can see in each case it's a cross. It makes it look very square. There's also a square across coming in to make it look square in each of the points. The minimum number of rosegrounds you can have is 1. So you could just have a single section of these. The important thing to note is that when you've got 2 together, and they'll always be diagonally if there's 2 together, the connection between them, there is only 1 of them. So effectively, that stitch that's there is shared between those 2 neighbouring pieces. If we didn't have this connection here, this would effectively be just like the ground that we saw as one of our first grounds in tartan. The ground in this particular version of Roseground is half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that's what we had in tartan, and the threads from there would go direct to that pinhole. But because we've put this cross between them, we've got something different. So let me now change to the working diagram. So we've effectively got 2 repeats showing on our working diagram. And like I did with spiders, I'm going to start off with the second one rather than the first one. So when we looked at our lace, there were no individually loose threads. So that means that anything going into this area needs a twist on it. If there wasn't a twist, we'd have seen 2 threads going in, and it just looked like a thicker section of thread coming in, which is a twisted pair. So we just look at 1 set of 4. On the working diagram, you won't find the pattern marking, but you can see there's a diamond of 4 pins. And in this version of Roseground, that diamond of 4 pins is half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that's what we did in tartan. It's a ground that we're familiar with. It's the ground that we actually start off at the top with. However, what we've got here is we've got a red cross with pairs coming out of the fan going into the Roseground. So a red cross is cloth stitch and twist. So there's a red cross on either side of this. So it's worked with 4 pairs, and the top stitches, they're not rows, but there is no pin at that point, and that does confuse some people. The most likely thing that goes wrong with Roseground is that people forget about one of these connections between them. So after we've worked this section, we will do a transition to the next set of 4 diamonds, the next Roseground, and you can see that transition is a red cross again, which is a cloth stitch and twist, but there's only 1 of them. So it's shared between that block and this block. However, at the end of this block, we have a red cross here, so a cloth stitch and twist here. That individually goes out into the fan, but this one is shared as the opening to this next set of 4 diamonds, so the next Roseground. Okay, so let me just explain why the top one is slightly different. So the top one has no dashes on those lines. Okay, so we've seen this before. We saw this with the legs on the spider. There are no dashes on here because the half stitch, pin, half stitch that we've worked here, the green cross followed by a pin followed by a green cross, naturally has a twist on it. So these are already twisted coming into the work. So that's why that top one is very, very slightly different. But anything coming out of the fan will need one twist on it. And then we'll work the cloth stitch and twist stitches that are the connectors between them, and the bit that makes the roseground look square. Now, you could substitute this half stitch pin half stitch. My suggestion is that at this point you only work half stitch pin half stitch roseground till the roseground is really in your head. Same with the connectors, you can do half stitch connectors. And for now, whatever your pattern says, stick to this version until roseground is really in your head, and then you can look at playing about with the other versions of it. You will potentially initially confuse yourself trying to work different versions. So think of roseground always as, for now, as the cloth and twist at the corners, and half stitch pin half stitch in a diamond of 4 pins. Okay, so I'm now ready to work the roseground, the very top of those roseground, so that's that collection of 4 pins and the connections to the sections. So the first thing to do is to put on the red stitch, the cloth stitch and twist in those corners, so the bits that's going to make it square. So if we think of our pairs numbered 1, 2, 3 and 4, what we're going to do with pairs 1 and 2, we're going to make a cloth stitch and twist, and then with pairs 3 and 4 we're going to do a cloth stitch and twist. 1, 3, 4. Okay, so you can see it is starting to form that square if we hold our pairs in the right place. So we're now going to work this collection of pins around that central diamond. So if we think of the pins as 1, 2, 3 and 4, some people find it easier to think about everything in terms of numbers, in terms of those 4 pairs. So number the pairs again, 1, 2, 3 and 4, and pairs 2 and 3, so the central pairs, do half stitch, pin, half stitch. Okay, and then we do that at the outside. So pairs 1 and 2, it's half stitch, pin, half stitch, and then with pairs 3 and 4 as well, it's half stitch, pin, half stitch, and then finally with the central pairs, half stitch, pin, half stitch. So going back to the working diagram, we did the central pin, then we did the pin on the left, then the right, and then the one that is in between. And then we need to finish off our roseground by putting the connecting bit, the shirred bit in. And as I said before, that's a red cross, which is cloth stitch and twist. Cloth stitch and twist with 1 and 2, and a cloth stitch and twist with 3 and 4. Okay, so we've got our square bits in there. Okay, so next we're going to move down to the next roseground. So we've already worked that connector in there, but we haven't worked the one that's here. So we don't need to add any twists because they should come in with 1 twist on. So let's check first that they have 1 twist, 1 twist. So we now need to work that cloth stitch and twist. Okay, so that gives us our square bit. But let's just double check. We've got it already on this side, so we don't need to add it again. So central pairs. half stitch, pin, half stitch, pairs on the left, half stitch, pin, half stitch, pairs on the right, half stitch, pin, half stitch, central, half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that is now our diamond of 4 pins, but we still need to do the closing bit, the connecting bit. So again, they are cross stitch and twist, but there's no pins in. And then the same on this side, cross stitch and twist. So you can see, hopefully through my my Forester pins, there is a little cross where I'm pointing currently, which does make it look like the diagram. So let me go up to the top. So always working with 4 pairs. So there'll always be 2 from the left and 2 from the right. So if I'm working this one next, the ones from this side already have that connector on them, but the ones from the right have come in as single pairs. So first of all, the thing to do is to put that cross stitch and twist on there. Okay, and then we're going to do the same again around that central diamond. So central pairs are half stitch, pin, half stitch, left hand pairs, half stitch, pin, half stitch, right hand pairs, half stitch, pin, half stitch, central, half, pin, half. So we've got our diamond of pins, but we need to do that finishing off. So the finishing off and the connector between the Rosegrounds. So they're all cross stitch and twist. They're all the red crosses. So cross stitch and twist over this side, cross stitch and twist with those 2. Okay, so we've now done our 3rd Roseground. So we're now going to do the next one, the final one in this block of 4. So let's check first. We've got the connector already on from the left. We've got the connector already on from the right. So it's half stitch with the central pin pairs, pin, half stitch, pairs on the left, the same. Half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, and central again, half stitch, pin, half stitch. And then the final bit that we need to do is the closing, the connector bit at the end. So red stitch is cross stitch and twist, cross stitch and twist. But remember, there are no pins in any of those. And it's that, I think, the fact there's no pin that means people sometimes forget. So when you're doing Roseground, always try, if you have to break off from your work, to leave it that you're at the position that you've got a complete Roseground with its bottom connectors, its bottom joining stitches, its bottom transitions in at the same time, so that you've got a complete block always done. So just before I work it, let me talk you through the fan. So our first fan is like on our previous pattern. We start off bringing a pair in. So our worker for our fan has come up from the top pinhole, and then it's going to weave backwards and forwards. But the difference to the previous pattern is that along the edge we've got red crosses, not purple crosses. So that means that this passive is always worked through in cross stitch and twist. And we've obviously got the invisible 2 twists at the end of each row. In the last pattern, we also needed to add a twist to every time we went past that outside passive. In this one, we don't. And that's because, much like we've got at the top, this red cross, which is a cross stitch and twist, already has the twist built into the stitch. So that's why we twist our worker before working that stitch, but coming back, the twist is actually built into the stitch itself. So let me show you that in work. So I'm now going to work this outside fan, and it is very similar, obviously, to the one that we've done before. So we're going to put on the outside an extra pinhole in the work to hang the outside passive on. So in terms of my bobbins, they're obviously the same colour, but my outside one are a short pair of red, and my worker is a longer pair of red, so I can always tell the difference. So we're going to work cross stitch and twist. This one's at the edge, so it needs an extra twist on it, and put the pin in. We're now going to come back through this passive red pair in cross stitch and twist, and then I'm going to bring one more pair in from the work. So as before, I'm going to bring in 1 pair at each pinhole, but I need to make sure always that the cross is there. So it's just a little bit of extra security. So the cross is there on that one. So first one, bring 1 in. So we are only bringing 1 at each pinhole, not 2. So twist twice, put the pin in, and go back through the passives. So my white passives that have come from the Roseground, I'm going to work through in cross stitch. I've then got 1 passive left. So as on the previous piece, I'm going to twist my worker, work the edge stitch, which is this time cross stitch and twist, with 1 extra twist needed because we're at the end of a row, and put the pin in. So we should always have 2 twists at the end of a row. So the stitch gives us 1, we need 1 extra. Cross stitch and twist. Okay, no need to add an extra twist because the stitch has given us the twist that we need. So this time I'm going to work through 1 and bring in 1 extra. Twist twice, put the pin in. Then come back. So through my Roseground passives, I'm going to call them, rather than the edge passive. Okay, 1 pair left to work through, and the fact that it's a different colour to the others helps me here. I need to twist my worker, and then through this outside one in cross stitch and twist, the red cross. Put an extra twist on because the worker needs 2 at the end of a row. It's got 1 from the stitch. Cover the pin with cross stitch and twist. No need to twist my worker, it's got 1 from the stitch, and then cross stitch through the pairs that are already there. It's getting wider, so I need to bring in another one. Let me just check. Yes, the cross is there coming out of the Roseground. So through 1 more, not 2. It's very tempting when there's 2 pairs together, sometimes to bring in 2 at a pin. But we definitely want to see that cross. They need to go into successive pins. Twist it twice, pin in, and come back. Through the white passives, the Roseground passives. Now at my last passive, so I'm going to twist my worker, work through the edge one in cloth stitch and twist, add an extra twist to give me 2 at the end of the row, and put the pin in. And remember, those edge ones aren't ever shown on the working diagram. So back through the the fan passive in cloth and twist. No need to put an extra twist on the worker, it only needs 1 twist on it, and come back. Okay, our work is still getting wider, although this is the last pin, and I'm going to bring in that final part from the Roseground on this side. Just twice, pin in, and come back. So as before, as we get to the last passive, we need to twist our worker and work through the last passive in cloth stitch and twist, with an extra twist on the worker because we're at the end of a row to give us 2. Pin in, come back, cloth stitch and twist. No need for an extra twist. Work through the passives that are there, but my work is getting narrower, so I don't work through the last one. I leave 1 out. Twist twice, put the pin in. Okay, and then come back. So once I've finished going through the white passives, I've hit the last one, I twist my worker once, and then the outer one is worked through in cloth and twist. With an extra twist, because we're at the end of the row, pin, and come back. With cloth and twist to cover the pin. So this time through 2. It's getting narrower still, twist twice, put the pin in. Okay, and cover, come back through 2. Twist my worker once. One thing to watch with the edge passive, because it is cloth stitch and twist, you do need to make sure that you're tensioning as you're going along, because it's really difficult to pull past a cloth and twist. But you only need to, it's that stroking at the end of the rows again. So cloth stitch and twist to cover, back through 1, end of the row, because we're leaving 1 out because it's getting narrower, twist twice, put the pin in. Back through a 1 passive, and then we're at the edge passive. Twist once, cloth stitch and twist at the end of a row, so 1 extra twist, and put the pin in. So that is our first fan on this side complete. So setting up the other fan is identical, and I've done that in the previous pattern. So I'm going to stop the video at this point, and I'm just going to come back when I've done it, and I'm just going to look at starting that next Roseground, just because it's very slightly different on the second one, as we talked about when we looked at the working diagram. So I'm now ready to work my next section of Roseground. So 4 individual Roseground with their connectors and their links. So I said the first Roseground was slightly different, and the bit that's different is that as the pairs come out of the fan area, they're not twisted. We need our pairs twisted. So I need to twist every pair that's coming out. So let me just do the first ones that are showing. The other 2 are a bit further off my pillow. Actually, let me do them so that then everything has that 1 twist. So to work our next Roseground, we are taking 2 pairs from either side, 2 pairs from this side, 2 pairs from this side, and we first of all need to do that cloth stitch and twist that gets us into the Roseground. So cloth stitch and twist on this side, cloth stitch and twist on the right. So we can see the square, we can see the square corner. And then, as before, we've got that diamond to do. So half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch. And after our little block of 4, we need to remember to do our connectors. So the ones on the left do cloth stitch and twist to give us our square section, and the ones on the right do cloth stitch and twist to move us to the next one, and they're shared. So we then carry on the pattern in exactly the same way that we have been working. So I'm going to carry on working mine. I'm going to get to the very end, because this video is closer up than the previous videos. I will do the last pin so that you can see that in a bit more detail. So I'm now at the end of the work. So I've worked the last section of Roseground, and then I've still got these 2 rows of pins. So I said I'd do this on camera, so that, because this is much closer than the others videos have been so far. So I've turned my working diagram around because the start is the same as the finish. So the first thing that we need to do is to cover that last fan pin with cloth and twist, which is the red stitch. And then we've got a series of half stitch, pin, half stitch. No need for any extra twists or anything like that, because the twists are built in. So first of all, we've got that cloth stitch and twist at the edge. We've then got 1, 2, 3, 4 half stitch, pin, half stitch. So half stitch, pin, half stitch, half, pin, half. So this is sending the red, and that was the worker, along the diagonal, just like we had at the top of the pattern. Half, pin, half, half, pin, half. Okay, so that's that side complete, except for the last pinhole, which we can't do until we've done this side. So I'm going to repeat over this side. So according to the working diagram, the first thing that we need to do along this diagonal is to cover that top pin. Half stitch, sorry, cloth stitch and twist to cover it, and then a row of half pin, half. Half stitch, pin, half stitch, 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 half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that's the end of our lace. It gives me an extra twist, and then do the second half of a reef knot, so that this time it's left bobbin over the right and bring that bobbin through. So I'm going to repeat that. Right over left. Sorry, I'm not sure that you can see that. Let me move further down. So it's right over left to start off with, twist, twist, come through twice, tighten off, and then next time left over right, and then grab the spangle of the one that's now on the right through. Okay, so that is our work now complete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video at this point, but then I've put some deliberate mistakes in this piece. So I'm going to do a bit of taking out of pins, and I'm going to show you what those deliberate mistakes are. So they're deliberate for me, but there are mistakes that you could quite easily make in your work. So before I do that, I will chop the bobbins off the pillow to take the weight off the threads. So I said I would show you some common errors, or rather the common error with Roseground. And I've taken pins out of this section here, and this is the Roseground where the errors are. So there's errors at 2 points, and they are actually the same error. So you can see on previous and the Roseground below that our Rosegrounds are very square. You can see here that it's not square, and that doesn't have a square corner. In both cases, what I've done is I've not done the connector between the two, the cloth stitch and twist that links the two together. And in this case is shared, in this case is owned by that Roseground itself. So you will no doubt see that. One of the reasons that I only teach this Roseground and this square Roseground is because you can see that square quite easily within it. There is another Roseground that rather than half pin half, it's cross stitch and twist, pin, cross stitch and twist. But that's got a lot more work to it, and it's actually a lot more difficult to tension. So I'm going to stop the video now that I've shown you that. Good luck with your Roseground.